In February 2012, an undercover cop in Canada made a routine purchase of counterfeit money. Little did he know he was about to uncover the greatest one-man counterfeiting operation in history. The mastermind behind it all? A man named Frank Bourassa. What's truly shocking is that neither the police nor the US government had any clue about Frank's operation. How did one man manage to print $250 million in fake US currency right under their noses? The answer lies in a journey that began decades earlier, with a 12-year-old boy's burning desire to escape poverty. Picture a young boy in Trois-Rivières, Quebec, surrounded by poverty and dreaming of wealth. This is Frank Bourassa, a 12-year-old with an accidental knack for spotting opportunities. Growing up in a struggling household, Frank's early life was marked by a lack of good food and constant loneliness. But it was these very hardships that ignited a burning desire for change within him. One day, Frank noticed something peculiar at school. Older students were flaunting bags of expensive stolen clothes. For most, this might have been just another day at school, but for Frank, it was a revelation. He saw something others didn't, a market opportunity. Other kids wanted these clothes too, but they lacked the means or courage to steal them themselves. Frank's mind started racing. What if he could become the middleman? This moment of insight marked the birth of Frank's first criminal enterprise. He began organizing what to steal, telling the older students which items were in demand. Then, he would buy the stolen goods from them and resell them to his classmates at a steep markup. It was a simple yet effective system, and Frank managed his inventory with surprising efficiency for a 12-year-old. The profits started rolling in quickly. By the time he was 13, Frank was earning hundreds of dollars weekly, a fortune for a 7th grader in 1970s Quebec. This early taste of financial success did more than just line his pockets. It ignited a lifelong pursuit of wealth that would eventually lead him down a path of increasingly daring criminal enterprises. But Frank's success came at a cost. His disregard for rules and his growing involvement in illicit activities didn't go unnoticed. By the age of 15, the consequences of his actions caught up with him, and he was expelled from school. This pivotal moment marked a darker turn in Frank's life, pushing him further into the world of crime as he sought to escape his troubled home life and the limitations imposed by society. Frank's early success as a middleman not only provided him with financial independence, but also solidified his belief that he could navigate the criminal world successfully. This belief would later contribute to his ambition to create one of the largest counterfeiting operations in history. The question is, how does a 12-year-old boy's scheme to sell stolen clothes evolve into becoming the world's greatest counterfeiter? The answer lies in the lessons Frank learned during these formative years. He discovered his talent for spotting opportunities, organizing complex operations, and managing risk. He learned the value of being the middleman, the person who connects supply with demand without getting their hands dirty in the actual theft. These early experiences shaped Frank's approach to crime. He wasn't interested in violence or confrontation. Instead, he focused on outsmarting the system, finding loopholes and maximizing profit while minimizing risk. This mindset would serve him well in his future endeavors, allowing him to stay one step ahead of law enforcement for years to come. Frank's journey from petty theft to more serious crimes took an unexpected turn when he decided to go straight. At 15, he left home and landed a job as a mechanic, hoping to leave his troubled past behind. But old habits die hard, and the allure of easy money soon crept back into his life. As Frank worked in the garage, he couldn't help but notice the valuable car parts surrounding him. His criminal mind started churning, and he saw an opportunity he couldn't resist. The transition from selling stolen clothes to car parts was seamless for Frank. He knew the market, understood supply and demand, and had already developed a network of buyers from his previous ventures. At first, Frank started small, pocketing a few spare parts here and there. He'd sell them on the black market, making a tidy profit on the side. But as his confidence grew, so did his ambition. Frank realized that selling individual parts was just scratching the surface of what he could achieve. The real money he discovered was in stealing and selling entire vehicles. Frank's experience as a mechanic gave him an edge. He knew which cars were in high demand, which parts were most valuable, and how to dismantle vehicles quickly and efficiently. This knowledge allowed him to expand his operation from individual parts to whole cars, significantly increasing his profits. The financial windfall was immediate and substantial. Frank found himself tripling his monthly income through these illegal sales. The money was rolling in faster than he could have imagined, and it was intoxicating. But with great reward came great risk, and Frank soon found himself grappling with the consequences of his actions. As his criminal enterprise grew, so did Frank's anxiety. He was constantly looking over his shoulder, wondering if today would be the day he'd get caught. The fear of discovery ate away at him, causing sleepless nights and constant stress. Frank tried to rationalize his actions, telling himself that this was just temporary, a means to an end. He convinced himself that once he had enough money, he'd leave the criminal world behind for good. Paranoia set in, and Frank found it increasingly difficult to trust anyone around him. He was always on edge, suspecting that everyone from his co-workers to his friends might be informants or undercover cops. This constant state of alertness took a significant toll on his mental health, isolating him from genuine relationships and further entrenching him in the criminal underworld. Just when Frank thought he had mastered the art of crime, he decided to try his hand at something even more challenging, going legit. But could a man really wash away his past with brake pads and factory grease? By his 20s, Frank had accumulated enough wealth to attempt legitimacy again. Using his automotive expertise and illegal earnings, he established a brake pad manufacturing facility. On paper, it was a success story. Ex-criminal goes straight, build honest businesses. Reality proved harsher. 20-hour workdays triggered panic attacks, his hair fell out in clumps, and vitamin deficiencies landed him in hospitals. The legitimate world's stress exceeded anything he'd experienced in crime. After selling the factory, Frank took 2 years to travel with his girlfriend. The break gave him time to reflect on a startling realization. Legitimate business had nearly killed him, while his illegal operations, when properly managed, had run smoothly and profitably. Upon returning to Canada, his path was clear. He needed an illegal venture, but one with fewer moving parts than his previous enterprises. The early 2000s in Canada presented Frank with an unexpected opportunity. The marijuana trade was booming, creating a lucrative black market that seemed tailor-made for someone with his particular set of skills. At first, Frank approached it cautiously, testing the waters to see if this new venture could provide the financial freedom he craved without the backbreaking labor of his previous legitimate business. To his surprise and delight, Frank found that dealing marijuana was significantly more profitable than any honest work he had ever done. The demand was high, the supply chains were relatively simple, and the risks seemed manageable compared to the potential rewards. It felt like he had discovered a secret passage to wealth, one that didn't require 20-hour workdays or constant stress. But in 2006, a single mistake, selling to an undercover officer, earned him 3 months in prison. This setback sparked an epiphany that would change everything. During his time behind bars, Frank had an epiphany about the drug trade's absurdity. All the complex logistics, dangerous associates, and constant risks. And for what? The whole point was making money. That's when the idea first started forming in his mind. After release, he returned to marijuana temporarily, but his thoughts were already racing towards something bigger. The moment of clarity came in 2008, sitting at a red light on his way to another drug deal. The solution seemed almost laughably obvious. Why deal in products when he could create money itself? His eyes fixed on the green paper in his hand, and suddenly it all made sense. Why not print the money himself? Frank's love for money but hatred of earning it made counterfeiting the perfect solution. His plan focused on American $20 bills, chosen because U.S. currency still used paper rather than polymer like Canadian notes, and 20s would attract less scrutiny than larger denominations. Frank faced one significant hurdle. He knew absolutely nothing about counterfeiting or printing, but in the digital age, knowledge was just a search away. Frank's research into counterfeiting displayed the same methodical thoroughness that marked his previous ventures. Using public libraries and internet cafes, never the same location twice, he devoured information about U.S. currency specifications available on government websites. The technical details proved far more complex than anyone could have guessed. The U.S. Treasury used specialized intaglio printing presses manufactured by KBAGIORI, creating unique textures through an astonishing 20 tons per square inch of pressure. The magnetic ink contained precise ratios of metal oxides that had to match exactly to fool electronic scanners. Most counterfeiters failed by underestimating these technical challenges, but Frank saw each one as an engineering problem to be solved. His attention to detail revealed crucial insights. The red and blue security fibers that most assumed were embedded during paper manufacturing were actually printed using fluorescent ink, a discovery that simplified one of counterfeiting's most daunting challenges. Through extensive research, he located a Chinese supplier for the color-shifting ink used on the 20 numeral. Frank's most innovative solution addressed serial numbers. He wrote a computer program generating valid combinations following treasury patterns, ensuring no duplicates would ever exist. Paper acquisition proved the operation's greatest challenge. Frank created elaborate cover identities to approach manufacturers. His first persona, Thomas More from a fictional stationery company, met with repeated rejection. Undaunted, he became Jackson Maxwell of Keystone Investment and Trading Company, seeking specialized paper for anti-counterfeit bond certificates. In January 2009, Switzerland's Artal Paper Company finally agreed to help. When they mentioned lacking certain equipment, Frank demonstrated his commitment by shipping them a $115,000 cylindrical printing drum from Germany. This move wasn't just about solving technical problems. It showed Frank's financial capacity and attention to detail. The sample paper that arrived mid-2009 brought tears to his eyes. It was perfect. Frank immediately ordered $50,000 worth, enough to print $250 million in 20s. Prison connections helped him acquire a Heidelberg offset printer. He added specialized paper cutters, plate-making equipment, and inkjet printers for serial numbers. Total investment reached $300,000. Significant money, but with potential returns exceeding 26,000%, it represented the investment opportunity of a lifetime. Production required the same obsessive attention that marked his research phase. Through extensive testing, Frank discovered that heating the plates to precisely 180 degrees Fahrenheit perfectly replicated the Treasury's raised ink effect. His quality control method was brilliantly simple yet effective, mixing his counterfeits with genuine bills and challenging bank tellers to spot the fakes. None ever could. Moving the paper required military-level precision. When the shipment arrived at the port, Frank knew this was one of his most vulnerable moments. For 3 full days, he conducted meticulous surveillance using binoculars, watching for any signs of law enforcement or suspicious activity. He studied every vehicle that came and went, every person who worked at the port, and mapped out all possible escape routes. Frank's transport scheme was deliberately complex. First, he rented a box truck under a false name to make the initial pickup. He hired a second car and driver who would follow the truck. As the first truck approached a specific highway on-ramp where traffic naturally bottlenecked, the second car pretended to break down, blocking traffic for exactly 20 minutes. This guaranteed the truck had enough time to escape any potential surveillance. Security didn't end there. The main truck then went to a designated parking lot where it sat under 24-hour surveillance for another 3 full days. Frank still hadn't come into contact with his precious paper directly, a deliberate choice to maintain distance. Frank trusted no one with the full picture. He hired a revolving door of accomplices, never using the same person twice for any part of the transport. Each person only knew their specific task. One driver only knew to pick up the package. Another only knew to drive to a specific location. A third only knew to transfer boxes. None knew what was inside or the overall plan. For the final move, Frank rented another box truck with a new driver, transferred the paper to new pallets to avoid any potential tracking devices, finally transported it to the garage he'd rented from a farmer, paid the farmer in cash to ensure there was no paper trail. This obsessive attention to security and compartmentalization of information would later prove crucial in keeping his operation secret even after his arrest. For 5 intense months, while his schoolteacher girlfriend slept unaware, he worked through the nights creating perfect 20s. By early 2010, he had amassed $250 million in flawless counterfeits. Distribution posed the next great challenge. Finding buyers proved surprisingly difficult. Even hardened criminals sensed something unusual about the operation's scale and sophistication. Most warned him to be careful, recognizing that an operation this perfect might attract unwanted attention. Eventually, 4 international distributors began moving his product, starting with small orders that grew to millions as they verified the quality. The operation ran flawlessly until February 2012, when Eric Lefebvre mentioned Frank's counterfeits to the undercover officer investigating stolen equipment. The officer eagerly ordered $100,000. Despite instincts warning him away, Frank agreed to a second deal. Unknown to him, a police helicopter tracked their movements from above. At precisely 5 a.m. on May 23, 2012, heavy fists pounded on Frank's front door. His girlfriend woke in terror, completely unaware of his secret life. When Frank opened the door, officers burst in with weapons drawn, forcing both to the ground. Still in their nightclothes, they were handcuffed while police executed a methodical search warrant. The search revealed multiple counterfeit bill testing pens, several firearms, marijuana, and nearly $1 million in perfect counterfeits. Officers separated Frank and his girlfriend during transport. Standard procedure to compare stories. She was genuinely terrified and confused, having no knowledge of his operation. Initial interrogation by local law enforcement shifted dramatically when U.S. Secret Service agents entered. They threatened to charge his girlfriend as an accomplice, seize their home, and destroy her teaching career. Frank made his first strategic move, confessing only to what they'd found, protecting her while keeping his larger operation secret. The Secret Service delivered their bombshell. Frank faced extradition to America. 3 separate charges, each carrying 20 years, meant 60 years total. At 42, this was effectively a life sentence. They cited a similar case where a Canadian counterfeiter received 9 years and died in custody, emphasizing they'd pursue maximum penalties for Frank's more serious crimes. But Frank's lawyer discovered a crucial detail. Surveillance had lost sight of him during the garage deal. They challenged the search warrant's validity, threatening to have all evidence dismissed. Frank offered a clever deal: drop extradition, and they could keep their evidence. Canadian authorities, fearing embarrassment from a dismissed case, agreed. Released on $10,000 bail after 6 weeks, Frank took a construction job while under constant surveillance. His phones were tapped, and cars followed his every move. When prosecutors offered 3 years with 6 months served, Frank shocked everyone by refusing. Instead, he proposed surrendering $200 million in counterfeits and his printing press for complete freedom. What authorities didn't realize was that Frank had already distributed the remaining $50 million globally through an elaborate network designed to release bills slowly over many years. The Secret Service eventually calculated he'd printed $250 million. Not $200 million, but by then, the Canadians had already signed the deal. On January 31, 2014, Frank led authorities to a hotel parking lot containing the press and $200 million in counterfeits. The Secret Service's fury became evident as they realized their mistake. Canadian authorities had signed the agreement without calculating the total amount, leaving $50 million in perfect counterfeits beyond their reach. Today, Frank consults for governments on preventing counterfeiting, while his undetectable 20s continue their slow journey through the global economy. His legacy transcends typical crime stories. It's about a man who approached crime like an art form, who planned 10 steps ahead of everyone else, and who proved that sometimes the perfect crime isn't about violence or force, but about patience, intelligence, and an artist's attention to detail. The story of Frank Bourassa isn't just about counterfeiting. It's about the transformation of a 12-year-old clothes reseller into the creator of the most sophisticated illegal operation in history. From those first stolen designer clothes to his final masterpiece of perfect 20s, Frank demonstrated that true criminal genius lies not in force or fear, but in understanding systems and staying several steps ahead of everyone else. As Frank once said, "I am the world's best counterfeiter right now, no one better than me." Looking at the sophistication and success of his operation, it's hard to argue with that claim. His perfect 20s continue circulating today, indistinguishable from genuine currency, a lasting testament to the man who turned crime into an art form and walked away free to tell the tale.